ways. I think that loving yourself in all sorts of ways, loving your body, is a completely feminist, revolutionary thing to do. I think it's amazing if you can truly have good self-esteem and good body esteem for men and women. I think that's an amazing feminist thing to do, and trans folks, everybody. I think that I act out my feminism in my language. I am constantly learning and constantly open to more learning, so I try to use safe language in all the ways that language can be safe. So not saying anything that's like negative epithets, anything like that, being open to learning if somebody thinks anything I'm saying is offensive, having a conversation with that. And I think also a really important part of that is forgiving myself if I do something wrong. I think that's also kind of revolutionary, is to give yourself a break. I think one of the hardest parts for feminism, and one of the hardest kind of barriers I went through in gaining my feminist identity, was that, okay, so feminism is about making the world equal, and we're realizing that it's more than just making genders equal, it's making every identity equal, class and race and sexuality and ability and just on and on and on, all these things. It seems like this overwhelming amount of work to do. Like, how do we make the world equal? There's a lot of inequality out there. So kind of living by the idea of nobody has to do everything, but everybody has to do something, like that really kind of helps me, that I just do the best that I can. And I also really listen and trust women and trust the people who are kind of in it. Like, if I used to be kind of more, this isn't one of my focuses now, but a lot about labor rights. I still believe in labor rights a lot. Like, I only buy fair trade coffee when possible. Every so often I'm like, I just need a cup of coffee and there's no fair trade available. But, you know, I try to buy like only fair trade coffee, which is a small step, but it's something, and I believe it, and it's personal, and it's what I do. And so I used to try to do that with clothing. And then we brought a speaker to Mizzou's campus, this was a number of years ago, who was a workers' right advocate for clothing companies, who she worked in a sweatshop, and she talked about it, and she's like, boycotting stores that sell sweatshop clothing does nothing. You need to listen to us, the workers, and when we say, boycott on this day at this time, this particular store, that's when you need to do it. And so that really kind of opened my eyes to, I don't have the power to do this by myself. Big corporations aren't listening to me. Gap is not going out of business because I didn't get the latest tank top. But if I listen to the workers who are working for the Gap stores and I pay attention, then I can kind of do that. So really, like, trusting women, listening to women, trusting myself and loving myself. I can't express how big that is. And then, you know, I surround myself with people who I think are making me better people. I try really hard. I'm really intentional about my community and how I spend my time and my free time. I think the hardest thing with that, though, is getting to, like, elitist almost. Like, you don't have to be a perfect feminist to hang out, you know? Like, we should have a discourse, and I really want to work on, in the future, one of my goals and something I'm trying to do now is really, like, not judging other women, like, thinking, oh, well, you don't believe this? Well, I'm a feminist, and I do, so, like, you know, trying to be like, okay, why do you think that? And just getting to know someone and finding the common ground, because I think that's something that the world is missing in general, and something that feminism really believes in. I feel like I talked a lot there, so.
Acting out feminism, I would say that, like what Megan and some of the other people have said, is acting it out day to day. I'm from a small town, and I'm Catholic, a liberal Catholic, granted, but I think just being an example, at least for, I know Struby said before that, you know, I kind of changed her perception of, you know, being Catholic and still being a feminist, and I can see how there'd be confusion with that, you know, but just being from a small town and having parents who always told me that I could do whatever I wanted to, and I am, and I feel like that makes me really strong. And I have a really awesome, well, I thought it was awesome. This summer, I supervised 3 guys for a field season. I follow birds around the Ozarks and find their nests and sweat a lot. It's pretty terrible, but awesome at the same time. And so I was in charge of these 3 guys, and one of them that I worked really closely with every day, one day he said to me, he said, you know, this job, wasn't the brightest person, but he was really sweet, and meant very well, but he said, you know, this job is really hard and like really terrible sometimes, and I was just thinking, like, how easy would this be for a woman to do? And then I thought, my boss is a woman. And I know that makes him sound like such an idiot, but that he felt that he could tell me that and say that he had that realization. It just made me feel awesome. And you know, I try and, correct people if they say, things about women or make stupid words like that's so gay and stuff like that. And so I try and be an example in that way, and, be right there with everybody else and work really hard. And he actually recognized that, and I thought that was really awesome. So mostly it's just by example. I need to get more activistic on that. But I think that's okay to be that way too.
There's too many birds to help. I know, right?
Let's see. My story is different in that I grew up in a very traditional household, very sort of, all the girls did the dishes and the cooking, and my brothers and my dad were served. And I realized at some point that I really didn't like that very much. I also grew up in a very traditional Catholic household. And as I got into college, I really wasn't interested, I didn't know much about feminist issues, but my interest started out with actually racial issues. So the Chicano movement, and we had a MECHA at our university, which is a really radical organization, and I think my name's probably on some FBI list somewhere. Apparently, because we held Cinco de Mayo or something. It's really radical. So, but it was just learning about my background, things that I never learned in high school, a history that I didn't know about, that got me interested in, I don't know much about this. Are there women's issues? I took some classes and started really thinking about that. And so, as time went on, I learned about, the different kinds of oppressions that exist, and took courses that introduced me to feminist Marxism too, and thinking a lot and theorizing a lot about those issues. And so I think I became really aware of how important it was to just make this an everyday, like everyone has said, part of my identity. So with my kids, it's very different than how I grew up. They've talked to me about, somebody said so-and-so, oh, that's so gay. So even though they're young, there's ways to talk to kids, and I talk to them about what do they think that means, what it really means, and what it means by them saying that. I've talked to my kids about their interests and encouraging whatever they want to do, even if it's gender bending. My son, who was like, well, why does Emily get all the attention? Because she's got a nice dress on. I said, if you want to wear a dress, that's fine. I'll wear her dress. I don't care. And so, just that kind of attitude, with my kids on a personal level. In my research, what I do, studying patient-doctor interactions in South America, I did that and looked at issues of classism and racism in the way in which doctors were interacting with their women patients who had cervical cancer, and issues of morality that were sort of part of that construction of disease. And in being here, trying to support student activities and teaching what I teach. And, I wish I could do more, but right now I understand that my activity is also in waves. I could do more before I had children. I have 3 lovely children and a spouse, and so my time is more limited. And so I can't do as much as I would like to do, but I know that at some point, that will decrease, and I will actually be more able to do extra activities. But I think for right now, teaching and researching and talking to people in a difficult dialogue. I agree very much with Trudy that when these issues come up, people say, well, why do you believe that? That's, especially in my family. We sometimes try to avoid those, I must admit, and end up with how's the weather conversation. But sometimes I do engage those because it's important, and it's sometimes really hard when it's somebody that you love and it's your relative. But I do engage in those conversations and say why I think what I do. it's really interesting because, you know, my family, they're very different. I identify as Chicana and feminist. I'm the only one in my family, even though I have two sisters. They would probably not identify as feminist.